I'm going to be introducing our Dean, Peter Tufano, as the first speaker.
Good morning. Good morning! Excellent. So, how many of you from Saïd Business School? Great. I can't believe you got up on a Sunday morning. That's wonderful. How many of you from Oxford but not from Saïd? This is even better. Welcome to Saïd Business School. And then to all of you guests who are from neither Saïd or Oxford, I'd like to welcome you here. Especially exciting that you're here for this 13th annual Silicon Valley Comes to Oxford. I thought I'd just spend a minute explaining why we do this and then what you can hope for over the course of the next 2 days. And in order to understand why, I'm just going to look back here. So these three parts are really what we're all about. We're a business school for sure, but what we're trying to do here at this school is think about some problems the world is facing and how they might be solved. We think that business is the engine that is going to create growth in society. We think it's going to create jobs. We think it's going to create goods and services in all kinds of businesses. Some are going to be small businesses, some are going to be medium-sized businesses, big businesses, and then very, very big businesses. And we worry about all those at the school. So we worry about the largest organizations in the world in our work on infrastructure. But we also, on the other end, worry about how is it that new ventures will be created, and not only created, but then also grow. Scaling is just as important as starting. In fact, arguably, scaling is much more important than starting. So the reason we're here is not to celebrate new ventures and entrepreneurship, but rather to challenge ourselves to think about where are those areas where those new ventures can be formed, how do we get them started, but more importantly, how do we nurture them and how do we grow them? And that's because we think that if we're going to really work here and be a really important business school, working as a business community, trying to address the world's needs, we really have to be able to do that. And so the Silicon Valley Comes to Oxford in some sense is a commitment to this, a visible commitment to this. Well, how do we do what we do? At a place like Oxford, it's not unusual to kind of get somewhat kind of internally focused. And the word hubris sometimes comes in. And it's important that we not focus just on ourselves and what we know. And so therefore, there's two integral parts of this weekend that are important. The first is that this is not a business school event. Witnessed by the fact, for those of you who come from outside Oxford, there were probably as many hands of people in this room who come from outside the business school as from inside the business school. As remarkable as my 800 or 900 students are in our degree programs, 250 of which are in the MBA program, there are another almost 19,000 students around the university. And they're remarkable too. Great ideas are going to come from all over this university. And entrepreneurship then, and ideas and new venture creation can come from almost anywhere. And therefore, this event today is all about you, the rest of the university, as well as the business school students. So the 20 events that are scheduled for later today are really open to the entire university, as is the debate this evening. So how we do what we do is this, embedded in a world-class university. The other part of hubris would be believing that we have all the answers, that somehow in Oxford we know everything there is to be known. And that surely is not the case. So therefore, what we do, and I should say, some people have worked extraordinarily hard, and I'll thank them at the end, in order to assemble over the course of the next couple of days over 40 speakers from all over the world to come here and share their insights. Insights from starting companies, scaling companies, funding companies, supporting this whole process in the government sector, so that we can learn from them, because we not only teach, but we also learn here at the school. So with that as an introduction, let me just give you a sense of what you're in for the next few days. First of all, you are the largest group that's ever come here. We have over 600 people signed up for this year and 400 signed up for tonight's debate. And in addition to that, we'll be streaming this live to our alumni and friends on YouTube. You also can vote, as it were, by using the Silicon Valley Comes to Oxford app. So if you look at your programs, what you're going to see, let's just kind of take a peek at today, is that we have 20 sessions today broken up in 5 streams. There's a stream on venture capital, a stream on tech entrepreneurship, a stream on technology executives, a stream on healthcare, and a stream on sales and marketing. Let me just say a word about that 4th stream on healthcare and technology. Some of you will have stayed over from the big change event that just finished here yesterday afternoon. And with that, we worked with folks from the George Institute, which is a part of Oxford that is worried about innovation in healthcare. And so some of us have been spending the last 48 hours thinking about what innovations in the healthcare space might fundamentally transform that space and deliver frugal innovation. So there's a track here that continues that theme that we've just finished on. So 5 tracks. Feel free to attend any of these events that you'd like to. We will say, however, the rooms will get crowded, and it's first come, first serve. So try to get to the ones that you really want to see and try to get there early. During lunchtime today, the MBA students will have an opportunity, selected MBA students, to interact with the speakers and network in small groups. And then please don't miss the debate tonight. The topic is, the House believes that technology revolution will solve the global healthcare crisis. These debates, which are always both courteous and clever, are an opportunity for us to, in a particularly Oxford way, to reflect on important issues. And this year there's a slight theme about healthcare and innovation. So I'm not going to try to identify all the great and interesting people here on this program, but you'll see they come from all over. Co-founder of Skype, Gary, who's going to speak from eHealth, Cloudera, JetSetter, SQL Stream, Evernote. There's just amazing folks that you're going to hear from. And if I start to list them, then I'll miss some of them. And then more of them will be here tomorrow, where we turn this into an MBA event that is part of our curriculum. So another 25 events tomorrow. I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you at this point. Thank you to a lot of different people. First, thank you to our sponsors, Cometrica, Santander, and Juno Pacific. Without the financial support of these organizations, this event would be much more difficult to pull off. Second of all, thank you to our speakers. A number of people have flown in, many people have flown in from all over the world to join us. This is a curious weekend to do an event. First of all, curious to do an event on a weekend in the first place, and then to do it for those Americans right before Thanksgiving. So we're particularly grateful for people who have, fit this into their busy schedule. Third, I want to say thank you to the teams, and I want to underscore teams, not team, that have pulled this off. This is the 13th annual Silicon Valley Comes to Oxford. And there's an expression about standing on the shoulders of giants in academia. And in our case, we very much are grateful for not only the people who've pulled this off this year, but also the people who have made this possible over all the years. Some of them are here: Tom Hayes, Mike Malone, Joe DiNucci. Stephen Todd, I think, is somewhere here. Stephen's been really a force in making this happen in years in the past. And the team that's pulled it together this year. In particular, the team in the Entrepreneurship Center. Jim Hall and his crowd. You saw Eric, but there's a whole team of folks, and I'll let Jim thank them and introduce them tomorrow. Finally, I want to thank you all, or next to finally, penultimately, I want to thank you all for coming out on a Sunday morning. This demonstrates the value and importance of entrepreneurship, innovation, venture creation in our Oxford community. We can do lots of things to say this is important to us, but your getting up and getting out on a Sunday morning is surely the most credible signal that entrepreneurship matters a great deal. And then finally, the last thank you goes to this. We are not simply the business school that's next to the train station. We are Oxford's business school. We are Saïd Business School. And our whole reason for being, our whole strategy is about being embedded in this university. What we do and how we do it is very much informed by, but more importantly, driven and powered by the fact that we're here at Oxford. And to that end, I'm particularly delighted to introduce the Vice Chancellor of Oxford University, Andrew Hamilton. Apart from the fact that he's smarting from the fact that Yale University lost yesterday to a fabulous university called Harvard in the Harvard-Yale game. That's a little private joke between him and me for the rest of you. Andy has been a tremendous force here at the university, pushing forward an agenda that gets us to work closely together, working to both maintain the traditions of Oxford as well as to push it forward. And I am particularly proud and delighted to work for him and with him. With that, Andrew Hamilton. Thank you very much.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. And ladies and gentlemen, it's an enormous pleasure for me even on this difficult morning when Yale lost yet again to Harvard, the 12th time in the last 13 years. So you can hear, I'm a long-term Yaley, and Peter and I have this running competition. But we're not here to mourn the death of Yale football. We are here to celebrate entrepreneurship. And it's an enormous pleasure for me to formally welcome all of you to this 13th edition of the Silicon Valley Comes to Oxford. And in my 4 and a bit years as Vice-Chancellor, I've participated in all of the Silicon Valley events, and they have just got better and better and better. And it's wonderful to see the enthusiasm and the interest, as Peter has said, on a Sunday morning, to see so many of you coming out to listen to what will be stimulating, challenging, great presentations and discussions. That's a very important thing. And it happens at a time when the business school is very much evermore becoming more and more central to the work of the university. And the Dean has just laid out the central importance of the way in which this business school is embedded in, yes, a very old university, but a university and a business school with its eyes focused very firmly on the future. And it's that link to the university through the social sciences division, into medicine, as we've been hearing over these past few days and will continue to hear today, and also in those many other connections, both through the curriculum of the MBA program here, but also wonderful new initiatives in the business school, like the 1+1 program, where students get depth not only in the world of business, but also in another area of expertise, like global health, or the environment, or medical technology. These are opportunities and a future being laid out for this business school that makes it ever more embedded in the life of the university. And yes, the business school benefits from that connection, but let me assure you, the university also benefits greatly by these strengthened links. And for me, what has been particularly pleasurable this morning, as Peter said, was to see the number of hands that went up from people who are outside the business school, but very much part of the university. And in Oxford, we're very proud of these strong engagement with the world of business and the world of entrepreneurship. This opportunity for our students, wherever they come from, undergraduate and graduate, to learn the wiles of business, to learn the opportunities that are available for the creation of new initiatives and new businesses, is a very important thing for the university. I am delighted that our student entrepreneurial society, called Oxford Entrepreneurs, is the largest entrepreneurial society in Europe, with thousands of students, many of them undergraduates, participating in events, learning about the world of entrepreneurship. Oxford is very interested, deeply interested, in the field of technological innovation. We have a long history, and I would argue a very effective history, of spinning out companies from initiatives and research from the university. But I would even make a case, Oxford is a 900-year-old university, and our first spin-out occurred about 800 years ago, and it was called Cambridge University. And we have been spinning out consequences of Oxford scholarship for a very long time. We have a technology transfer organization called ISIS Innovations. They oversee the broad technology transfer for the entire university. And ISIS has just celebrated its 101st spin-out company. On a weekly basis, it files more patents than any other UK university. And while we'll be focusing on healthcare today and tomorrow, one of the things that many of you will have seen in the newspapers, about 2 weeks ago, there was a great announcement that a British engineering company had broken the land speed record for electric vehicles, well over 200 miles an hour. And that car was driven by a motor that was developed at Oxford University, an electric motor that was developed here by a company, a spin-out company called Yasser Motors. And you get a sense of the kind of technological innovation that this university has been focused on and committed to for a very long time. But of course, the focus of this year's Silicon Valley Comes to Oxford is healthcare, and it's entirely appropriate it should be, and it's entirely appropriate it should be here in Oxford, because we have here one of the very best medical schools and medical research enterprises in the world. And by some of the global rankings, Oxford's medical school is #1 in the world, ahead of Harvard, ahead of Stanford, ahead of Yale. It's a center of great innovation. It's a center of great focus on contemporary approaches to the delivery of healthcare and the discovery of new therapeutics and new initiatives, not only here in Oxford, the development of a big data institute in our medical sciences division, the work on epidemiology of enormous patient cohort investigations. The role of technological innovation in healthcare has been very central in Oxford, as has also been a global reach. And it is in Oxford that you will find involvement in more international healthcare initiatives. We have major research centers in Thailand, in Laos, in Vietnam, in China, in Kenya, all focused on bringing insight and new discoveries to the treatment of diseases, particularly in the developing world. So again, that commitment to innovation is very strong in this university and in this community. And the relationship between Oxford University and its partner hospitals has also been something that's strengthened over the past years and also allowed the university to really contribute to the improvement of healthcare in the region as well as the world. And so for me, it's an enormous pleasure to welcome all of you, Saïd Business School students, Oxford University students, but also our visitors from around the world. It's a glittering array of presenters that you will have this morning and during the next couple of days. I'm also particularly pleased to welcome Priya Guha here to the conference. Priya is the Consul General for the British government based in San Francisco. And Priya and her team are very busy increasing the economic ties between the UK and Silicon Valley. And we hope that this conference will go some steps to strengthen those links. Oxford has taken great delight in the fostering of the links between the university, between the business school, and Silicon Valley. And of course, as we look and watch and study California, we see a wonderful model for the way in which universities like Stanford and Berkeley interact with their region, interact with the development of new businesses in their region. And it's a style, it's a focus that speaks very much to us in the UK, particularly here in Oxfordshire, and yes, I have to say it, also in Cambridgeshire, that link between world-class universities and innovation and the economic engines that they create for the region. It's something that we, in this great and very ancient university, are committed to. And those of you who are new to Oxford, do enjoy these hours, these days that you will spend at this university. As you look around, you will see great, beautiful, and ancient architecture. But don't be fooled by that old architecture. This is a very modern university, a modern university with its eyes, as I said, focused on the future, developing new technologies, working on ways in which we can strengthen the role of a great university and its opportunities to benefit the world of healthcare, but of course the world as it extends into so many other fields of human inquiry. And so welcome all of you to Oxford, and I wish you the most successful and productive of meetings. And to kick off this morning's session, it's a particular pleasure for me to introduce Gary Lauer. And Gary will be speaking first. Gary is the CEO of eHealth. It's a great pleasure to welcome you, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, good morning, and Vice Chancellor Hamilton, thank you. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. This is actually my third trip from California to Oxford. I must say, listening to Vice Chancellor Hamilton talk about so many of the incredible things that have emanated from Oxford, including Cambridge University, on this Sunday morning, I'm feeling somewhat intimidated and a bit inadequate as well. But it's really great to be here. One of the things that I enjoy about coming here is that for me, it's a chance to get away from business, get away from the environment that I work in for the most part in the U.S., and come to this incredibly unique and special place, which to me I find to be incredibly inspiring. In fact, the last 2 years I've been here, I feel like I've left with much more for myself than I've been able to contribute. I've met so many great, fascinating people, and the students here are just absolutely amazing. It's a great place to be. So given all of that, I was coming here just with an open mind, thinking about all the fun different things I'll be able to do and to kind of get my head out of things that I typically do on a daily basis 7 days a week, until Jim Hall asked me if I would this morning talk about the healthcare system in the U.S., which I'm stuck right dead center in. So I thought I would make some comments on that for you this morning, and hopefully it'll be a bit insightful. I'm going to try and give you my unvarnished and objective view of what's happening in the U.S. And if you pay attention to any media at all right now about the United States, you have probably heard or read that there's a fair amount of attention being paid on the healthcare system. And really this transformation that's been legislated in the U.S. that's underway. Before I get to that, let me just give you a little bit of a background on myself and my company so you'll at least have some context. As Dean Tofano was talking about entrepreneurship and transformation and scale and technology, I like to think that's what my company does. We're a Silicon Valley born and bred company. We started this business almost 15 years ago. It still amazes me. It's the longest I've ever held a job. With a pretty simple inspiration, which was to use the internet to harness and corral this incredible volume of text and data in the U.S., which is health insurance, and to create an online marketplace that citizens in the U.S. could use to really slalom through this very complex and daunting decision process in the U.S., which is health insurance. So we're an e-commerce platform. We're not a health company. We're really a technology company. It happens that the products that are on our platform are health insurance products. In fact, if you could think of us as the Amazon.com or the eBay of health insurance, that'll give you a flavor for what we do. We try to present products to consumers in an unbiased and objective fashion. We're a consumer-facing company. Many of the consumers or customers who do business with us are individuals or small businesses, but this is all changing in the U.S. So that's what eHealth is. I just give you that as a little bit of a background. By the way, we're a publicly traded company. We started, for those of you who are thinking about entrepreneurialism and so on, we started as a venture-funded company in the late 90s in the U.S. When anything and everything was .com, and at the time, venture investors in the U.S. were waving their wallets around that anything that moved that had .com on the end of it. We were fortunate enough to attract a few of those who are waving their wallets around, and we're able to build a business that's actually been sustainable and worked. We took it public in the U.S. in 2006, and it's been quite successful. And most importantly, we like to think it makes a difference for people. In fact, one of the things I like to remind our employees of is that in our business, every day there's another family with children that have access to quality health care that didn't have it the day before simply because of what we do. So I really like this idea that we're able to build a business that's profit-making, I'm happy to let you know, that grows, but also can change the lives for some people. I've always thought that's a good combination. So anyway, enough about that. Me, very quickly. My background's not healthcare. When I came out of business school at the University of Southern California, where we do play some pretty good football, by the way, I went to work for IBM. From there, I was one of the early executives in a company called Silicon Graphics, which was all about visual computing, and really kind of fell into the lap of healthcare through all the technology that we've been doing. In ways that I never ever dreamt in my wildest dreams, I've become probably more knowledgeable about healthcare than I ever needed to or wanted to, but but here we are. So that's the background on my company, that's the background on me. Now, for those of you who are not Americans, since it's the US, let me quickly just describe the landscape for you of what's going on in the marketplace there and why it's rather unique. In the US, health care for people is not provided by government. You know, you've got a very good system here in the UK. It's my understanding that most, if not all, students and all faculty get to partake in it. Dean Tofano told me earlier it's very easy to access and to use, and it's paid by government here, obviously through taxation that comes up into government. And that's the case in most of Western Europe. We've looked at most of the countries in Western Europe. It's the case in many other countries around the world as well. It is not the case in the US. In the US, access to health care is typically paid one way or another through an employer, for employees, or by the individual. In fact, right after World War II, interestingly, in the manufacturing sector in the US, companies began to offer health care or health insurance as a benefit to attract workers. It became a big negotiating chip for organized labor unions in the US and spread. Today, the majority of citizens in the United States have to have health insurance, which they use to help pay for hospitalization, for medical services from a physician, for prescriptions at the pharmacy and things of that nature. Most businesses, or I should say many businesses provide it, many employers provide it to their employees, especially mid and large-sized businesses. And employees of state, local, and federal government in the United States get their health benefit or their health insurance that way as well. All health insurance in the US is underwritten by private companies, not the government. It's companies like Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Kaiser, Aetna. It's a long list of names, United Healthcare, some of which you may recognize outside of the US as well. These, for the most part, are all profit-making companies. They're very large companies. It works well for them, and the system has worked relatively well. However, one of the issues in the United States is that the cost of healthcare as a percentage of the gross domestic product has been rising steadily. And in a way that's becoming a real burden on a whole lot of things, including the US government deficit, as well as the cost for employers and the cost for individuals. In fact, healthcare in the US is a double-digit percentage of the gross domestic product in the US. It's staggering. In France, I believe it's about 7%. In the US, now we're running 13 to 14% and fast rising. In the US, the only set of industry or industries that's larger than healthcare is agriculture. Industries like integrated circuit manufacturing, software in the case of Microsoft, all the kinds of internet things and so on are simply dwarfed by the size of healthcare. So this is really, really a big thing. We also have in the US, like the rest of the world, I'm going to talk some more about this later today, an aging population. In fact, if you look at a bell curve of the population in the US, it keeps moving out to the right. Your left, my right. And what we've got is people who are, the population itself on average is growing older, and life expectancy, by the way, is increasing. Life expectancy in the US and in most parts of the world has increased 10 years in the last 50 years. So think about what that means for the demands on services and needs and so on that individuals and people have. So there's all that. Now, in the US, there's about 313 million residents. About 50 million of them are uninsured. They have no access to health care. They have no health insurance. This has been a moral dilemma for some time in the US, and it's been a bit of a political dilemma and problem as well. For the last 40 plus years, different presidential administrations in the US have tried to address this and tried to solve it. None have been successful. In fact, for those of you who are students of recent presidencies in the US, in the early days of the Clinton administration, this was something that President Clinton went after and was not able to do. So there's the background for you. So there's been a lot of desire to somehow impact and change the system in the US to make it more cost-effective, to make it more affordable, and to give more people access, to get these 50 million people who are uninsured access to some quality health care. And so if you take everything away, I think you would agree with me, from a moral standpoint, it makes sense. And if you can do it the right way, from an economic standpoint, it makes tremendous sense as well. And so I've been a supporter of this legislation from early on. So there's the background. 2009, actually 2008, President Barack Obama is elected President of the United States, Democrat. We have two parties in the US, Democrats and Republicans. Democrats are regarded as being more liberal or progressive. They're much more focused on social kinds of issues. Republicans are regarded as being a bit more conservative, more favor the private sector as ways to solve problems and so on, in a nutshell. We could spend hours talking about the politics in the US, but that might just give you a little bit of a flavor. When President Obama came into office, there was really a landslide in the elections in terms of Democrats who were elected into the US Congress. And the US Congress is where legislation is developed and passed. There's two houses in the US Congress. There's the House of Representatives, and there's the United States Senate. In 2009 and 2010, the majority of the House of Representatives were Democrats. The majority, a vast majority in the Senate were Democrats as well, President Obama's party. I think that President Obama surprised a lot of people early on when he took on health care reform as the piece of legislation he really wanted to focus on. Long story short, what was developed and then passed was something called the Affordable Care Act, now more commonly known as Obamacare. Very controversial when it was passed. It was, for the most part, developed by the Democratic part of the House of Representatives and the Senate. When it passed in the House and the Senate, it had no Republican votes. It only had Democratic votes. So from that, you might imagine it was a bit polarized right from the get-go. And it's been highly politicized ever since. So it passed it passed in 2010, in early March of 2010, but several years until it was going to have effect. So that's the background right now. So when I say Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, they're both the same thing. In fact, I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes and talk to you about a survey that was done recently about that I've always found to be quite interesting. So in this legislation, this reform, the objective and the idea is to get quality health coverage for every single American. Once again, sounds like a really, really good idea and something I think most people would agree with. Using the private insurance companies. Now, there were some who wanted to have a government-controlled and underwritten system. That's not how this legislation turned out. Its legislation is about providing health insurance coverage to ostensibly everyone in the U.S. through private companies. This legislation, to understand it, it's very complex. It's over 2,000 pages. But let me see if I can distill it for you into really four important concepts. It's got four parts of it. One is called guaranteed issue. That's the first part. Until recently, people who had pre-existing conditions, people who had chronic illnesses, people who were asthmatic, somebody who may have had cancer in their past, the insurance companies in the U.S., for the most part, could decide whether they're going to insure them or not. Okay, they were able to choose or select. And interestingly, about 15 to 20% of individuals in the U.S. who were purchasing their own health insurance, didn't get it through their employer, were denied coverage. So you had 15 to 20% of people who wanted to buy but couldn't. And in many ways, because of the conditions and medical issues they were dealing with, they were probably the ones who needed it most. The legislation includes guaranteed issue, which says that no one can now be denied for any medical reason. So everyone can be covered. So that's one. It's called the pre-existing condition mandate or guaranteed issue. Secondly is a mandate. And the mandate requires that everyone in the U.S. have health insurance coverage. And if you don't, you pay a penalty. Pay a penalty on your taxes. Now, this was very controversial because there are a number of people who believe that government should not force you to have to buy something. And that ended up actually being contested all the way through the U.S. Supreme Court. And for various reasons, the U.S. Supreme Court supported it, so the legislation survived. So you've got guaranteed issue that nobody can be denied, and a mandate that everyone has to participate in the system. And by the way, on those 2 points, the mandate is really important because if you have in a system like the U.S., if you have guaranteed issue, who are the people who are going to buy first? Those who need it and want it, those who are sick. Who's going to utilize the most? Those who need it and want it, those who have got conditions. How do you counterbalance all of that? You know, the very simple formula in insurance is you need at least as much revenue coming in as you have expense going out, and that's clearly the case with health insurance. So the idea with the mandate was to force people who aren't high utilizers, people who are healthier, younger people, to come into the system. They don't use health insurance much, they pay for it, they counterbalance the others, so the arithmetic works. That's the idea behind the mandate. So you've got guaranteed issue, you have a mandate. Thirdly, for lower income people, there are subsidies provided by the federal government in the U.S. to buy these products. The idea is that if you're going to force people to buy them and they can't afford it, you'd better help lower income people. And these subsidies are actually quite generous. They go all the way up to what's called 400% of the federal poverty level in the US. What that means is that a family of 4 can make as much as $93,000 of annual household income and get a subsidy to help buy health insurance. So you've got this subsidy system in place. And then fourthly, and this is really interesting, each of the 50 states in the United States was required to implement an exchange, an online marketplace, much like eHealth, but run by the state government, that individuals could go to be able to choose through different products and so on. So you've got guaranteed issue, you have a mandate requiring everyone to participate, you have subsidies for low-income people, and you have these exchanges. So there's the background. So those are really the key elements of the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. So several years go by, a lot of preparation. It launched in the U.S. on October 1st of this year. So I don't know, a month and a half ago. And it's been very interesting. Of the 50 states that are required to put up an exchange, 36 have not. Now, most of the Republican states have been resistant, if not defiant, about this legislation. So the backfall is that the federal government puts an exchange in those states that have not created their own. It's called healthcare.gov, built and run by the federal government. But there was a bit of an issue, which is that when October 1st rolled around, healthcare.gov didn't work at all. People couldn't get into this e-commerce system. They couldn't get through it. It quickly attracted a lot of media attention and went from there. And in fact, it has dominated the media in the U.S. over the last 7 to 8 weeks. You can't pick up a newspaper. You can't go online. You can't listen to broadcast media without hearing something about Obamacare. And interestingly, even some of the most supportive media outlets in the U.S. of the administration, like the New York Times, have become very critical of this. So people were not able to get into the system in 36 states to be able to enroll in these products. So that's one, and I'll come back to that. 2, in the 14 states that built their own exchanges, several of those have not worked as well. I know for a fact that in the state of Oregon, they've yet to enroll 1 resident in the state so far. So you can imagine what this is doing in terms of the perception that people are beginning to have about the legislation. And then, one of the things that was in the legislation is essentially a minimum level of benefits that each of these products have to be compliant with the Affordable Care Act so that you meet the mandate and don't have to pay the penalty. And many people regard these benefits that are legislated into this as being fairly robust. I would leave that to somebody to look at and make your own decision. But in many cases, these are certainly a higher benefit level than we had seen previously in products. And I speak publicly about this more than I'd like, but one of my analogies is that when you go to buy a new car, if you want the upgraded sound system and the good smelling leather, you're going to pay more. Well, that's the case with health insurance as well. So what's happened? Well, these products that are compliant with the Affordable Care Act are a bit more expensive. More importantly, there are millions of Americans who in the last several weeks have received cancellation notices from the insurance companies informing them that the current health insurance that they're holding is not compliant and they're going to have to go buy something new. Now that may sound okay, except that when President Obama was running for office, and more importantly afterwards when he was out marketing the Affordable Care Act, he said some words that I think he probably regrets. He said, if you like your health insurance, you can keep your health insurance, period. Except for millions of people who like their health insurance, but are finding they're being canceled because it doesn't meet the minimum benefit level. So you can imagine what that's generated in terms of dissatisfaction in media focus and so on. So you put all of this together and you swirl it up and you've got something right now that's very interesting. The goal is to enroll over the next several years 32 million of the 50 million uninsured into quality coverage. The goal in the first 6 months of the Affordable Care Act, October 1st to March 31st, is to enroll 7 million. 6 months, 7 million people. The month of October has gone by. Nationwide, through all the government exchanges, there were 103,000 people somewhat enrolled. We're not quite sure if they were enrolled. They've selected a product. That's as much as we know. And I know a lot about this. I can assure you that those 103 won't end up enrolling. So the hill is getting steeper, and it's starting to look higher. This is critically important, and let me tell you why. As you read about this and you hear about it, everything you hear and read about with Obamacare right now is about the cancellations, about the promises that the president made, about the fact that the website doesn't work and still doesn't work and may work at some point. In my view, that's really not the issue here. That's a bit of noise, and it makes for really good controversy and entertainment when it comes from a media standpoint. This legislation will stand or fall based on enrollment, based on the number of Americans that participate. And the people who are participating right now are people who are a bit older, who have got chronic conditions and have been waiting to get health insurance. And God love them, I think it's great. I can think of nothing better. But to help pay for all of that, you need a lot of younger people in the system. In fact, the key demographic is people who are between 18 and 34 years of age. Demographically and actuarially, these are people who pay into the system and are a lot healthier and don't use it much. And these are the people who aren't coming into the system currently. These are the people who want to be able to do this online. These are the people who don't want to be using a call center. These are the people who don't want to be filling out paper applications. They're the hardest to get to because for many of you in that age group, and I was there once a long time ago, you feel immortal. You're really healthy. I don't need any of this. That's for later on. That's for my parents. But therein lies the rub with all of this. And I spend a lot of time in the media in the US on this right now, and I'm just constantly talking about enrollment and how key and how important that is to the success of this legislation. And the thing that's concerning about it right now is that we're not seeing very good enrollment. The other thing that's interesting is that up to this point, this has become very government-centric. The federal government right now is focused on making this website work. I don't think that, now you're going to get some of my opinion, this is not the unvarnished part. I don't believe there's nearly enough focus on educating people, and there's not enough focus on the enrollment side of this. I'll give you a little flavor for the education part of this. There's a talk show host in the US who has a late night show. His name is Jay Leno. Some of you have probably seen him before. He does this person on the street surveys. And I just happened to catch one recently, and it's gone viral. It's not hard to find at this point. But he went out on the street with a microphone, and he just stopped people. And he said, "What do you think of Obamacare?" And the first person said, "Oh, that stuff's terrible. It's awful." "What do you think of the Affordable Care Act?" "Oh, I like that." Next person, "What do you think of Obamacare?" "Oh, it's ridiculous. It's government overreach. Why don't they do it?" "What do you think of the Affordable Care Act?" "Oh, I think that's much better." Well, this went on and on without exception. And this should just give you a bit of an insight and a bit of a flavor as to what's going on in the U.S. With this right now. I, for one, hope it's successful. I've been a supporter of it. I actually happen to be a personal beneficiary of this. I have a son who's 26 years old, is a type 1 diabetic. He's not been coverable. Now he is. There are many other people in that situation as well. But I know that to make this work, we're going to have enrollment that's much different than it's been in the past. And we're going to have to have outreach to people that's going to be done in ways that's never been done previously. And frankly, my strong view, being a supporter of this, is that government can't do this alone in the U.S. And in fact, I think in a very convincing way, government is convincing of all of us of this right now as well. So here we sit. So it's a big change in the U.S. There are some major consequences, and I'll share with you another one before I finish up, which I think is a fascinating one. As I said when I started out, that most mid and large-size employers provide health insurance to employees. That's a benefit. It's a way to attract people. In my company, we provide health insurance to all of our employees. It's actually quite robust and works out great. But the way that it works is that we select one or two products. It's one size fits all for everyone in the company. And that's fine. And it's worked up to this point. But now with the Affordable Care Act actually coming into fruition, being realized, there are more and more businesses in the U.S. that are considering exiting the group health insurance market, where they buy health insurance for their employees, and rather just giving each employee some kind of a contribution. It's called a defined contribution, a stipend, if you will, to go into the marketplace and select any product that they may like or want. And while that's interesting, I think what we're seeing right now in the U.S. is this tremendous change in the landscape. The way that people will be funding their health care and the way that they're going to be accessing it. And one of the other interesting things in the U.S. is that more and more of the cost of health care is moving to the individual. It's becoming a much more consumer-centered environment, a much more consumer-centric market. The number of employers offering health care was about 69% 10 years ago. It's about 58% in the U.S. and continues to decline. Even though an employer buys health insurance for an employee, employees still make some kind of a per payroll check contribution. About 90% of the cost typically is covered by the employer, about 10% by the employee. That 10% is growing to 15 and then to 20. And so again, this whole system is changing radically. You've still got a group of people who feel that this should be government-centered, that it should be one program for all that's funded by the U.S. government, much like the UK and other countries. That's not going to go anyplace politically for some time, but it's interesting depending upon what the outcome here is with the Affordable Care Act. If the Affordable Care Act doesn't attract the kind of balanced, wide and broad enrollment that I described to you, it's going to get mitigated, and it'll get mitigated by prices. What will happen is that as more and more dollars go out from the coffers of these insurance companies to pay for these medical services, and they don't have enough revenue coming in, there's only one way to mitigate that, which is to raise prices. And one of the concerns is that these products could soon become prohibitively expensive. I'm not predicting that, but it's one of the possible outcomes here as well. So we have a lot going on in the U.S. right now with Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. By the way, there's a lot of polling that's done in the U.S. Gallup is one of the well-respected polling organizations. The president's approval rating is at the lowest it's ever been since he's been president. This has all happened in the last 7 or 8 weeks with the implementation of Obamacare. And the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, whichever one you like or you don't like, that legislation now is polling at its highest unfavorability that it ever has since it was passed. So definitely many of the problems in the U.S. with the websites not working, with people not able to enroll, and a lot of these cancellations is certainly influencing the perception of people in the U.S. and perhaps tainting this a bit as well. And I personally worry quite a bit about that. So I hope this helps. I've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. I've tried to give you just a primer on the U.S. system, what this is about, what we're all dealing with right now in the U.S. and some of the possible outcomes. I think it's going to be really fascinating to follow this and see where it goes over the next year. By the way, to make it even more interesting, there are elections in the U.S. every 2 years. Every 4 years is a presidential election. The 2 years between that, those are called the midterm elections. Next year in 2014, we have midterm elections. There are 7 U.S. senators who are Democrats up for re-election next year, representing Republican states, and they supported the Affordable Care Act. I had the chance to spend 45 minutes on the phone with one of them on Friday. They're concerned, to say the least. One of the possible outcomes here, a possible outcome, is you could see a change, which I don't anyone expected, once again in the complexion and the makeup of the U.S. Senate next year. And there's a slight chance or possibility it could become a Republican majority. And if you have President Obama as a Democrat having a majority of Republicans in the House of Representatives and the Senate, it makes his last 2 years difficult to get anything to do. So there's all kinds of implications from this, from a public policy standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, from the standpoint of living in the U.S. and dealing with it, and especially from the standpoint of being kind of in the vortex of it with our company and so on. It's really it's a fascinating place to be, and I hope what I've described to you just gives you a little more context and substance, and as you read about it and hear about it, perhaps it makes a little bit more sense to you. So delighted to be here, and look forward to talking with many of you. Thank you so much.